A Fox News host was really upset that the media is going to focus more on Trump echoing the rhetoric of Hitler than the Senate porn scandal. Well, I have a clip to play for you from Fox News that is so representative of how Fox News tries to distract its viewers from super important subjects, because if their viewers were properly informed on those subjects, they likely wouldn't watch Fox News. So the context for the clip that we're going to watch is, as I covered in a previous segment today, Trump once again echoed the rhetoric of Hitler at a speech over the weekend, saying that migrants poison the blood of America. The Fox News host you're about to watch is upset that the media is going to be talking about that instead of spending all of its time talking about the Senate porn scandal. The quick summary of that is a Senate staffer allegedly had sex with someone in a Senate hearing room, recorded it, and the video got found, and that staffer was fired. Obviously crazy, and obviously if indeed the staffer was the person in the video, I'm not gonna go confirm that for you guys. You can't do that, and they should be fired. And that's what happened. There's not much of a political conversation to be had about that, right? Nobody disagrees. There's no discourse to be had. There should be accountability. Everybody agrees on that. That's your workplace. The Capitol specifically, wildly inappropriate. But Fox News is seemingly more upset with that than when people attacked the Capitol and tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. With that being said, here's Fox News.
Stick with me here, Shannon. You and I were together on Friday. We were hosting The Five. Okay. And during the show, by the way, is when I think we found out, Greg brought it up to us, this thing that happened in the Senate hearing chamber. Okay. We've talked about it this morning, where allegedly a Senate aide filmed basically gay porn in the Senate hearing chamber. Okay. Since that time, and we've talked, this is a big story. And it's not just like, hey, let's talk about how gross this is or whatever. This happened in the Senate chambers on an administration, within an administration that has promised to bring back the norms. On the other hand, Donald Trump, before he went to Nevada last night, was in New Hampshire, and he said this when talking about immigration. Listen.
When they let, I think the real number is 15, 16 million people into our country, when they do that, we got a lot of work to do. They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison mental institutions and prisons all over the world, not just in South America, not just the 3 or 4 countries that we think about, but all over the world.
Okay, so Shannon, the mainstream media is going to talk about this. They already are. It is going to take over everything. Poison the blood of our country when talking about illegal immigration. In fact, the Biden-Harris administration has already jumped all over it. They tweeted or said the following. Tonight, Donald Trump channeled his role models as he parroted Adolf Hitler, praised Kim Jong-un, and quoted Vladimir Putin while running for president on a promise to rule as a dictator and threaten American democracy. He is betting he can win this election by scaring and dividing the country. He's wrong. The reason I bring up those two stories to you, Shannon, is I thought, and I think it should be a big deal that we're talking about what happened in the Senate hearing chamber. And I think what we're going to do, I think what's going to happen here, Shannon, for the next couple of days is we're going to latch on to 3 words that Donald Trump said, and it's going to drive the news cycle.
Are you kidding me? Someone did something that was obviously something you should be fired for, and they were fired for it. What are we supposed to talk about in relation to that? If there's an extra level of accountability, I heard Capitol Police was investigating it. If there are laws that were broken, then pursue that too. Woohoo, accountability. Nobody disagrees on that. And how consequential is that in the lives of Americans? Like 0% consequential. But he thinks it should be the story people are focused on, like a bunch of perverts, instead of a guy openly campaigning as a wannabe dictator. And no, it's not focusing on just 3 words that Trump said, as the Fox News host tried to assert. It's focusing on this, okay? Donald Trump in 2020 and 2021 tried to block the peaceful transfer of power to keep himself in the White House after he lost the 2020 election. He did this through the fake elector scheme, through pressuring local officials to engage in fraud, and all these different schemes. When all those efforts outside of our legal process for challenging elections failed, he incited a mob to attack the Capitol. That was how desperate he was to hold on to power. And then since then, he has called for the termination of the Constitution, said the government should come down hard on media outlets he doesn't like, specifically MSNBC, said that in times gone by, his former top general would be executed. He said he wants to be a dictator on day one, but only on day one, lol. He can't stop obsessively salivating over Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, and other authoritarians. He's directly echoing the words of Hitler and is saying he's going to prosecute his political opponents if he gets into office. And not to mention behind the scenes, he has actual plans to lock up his critics if he gets into office again, actual plans to target media outlets he doesn't like, and plans to invoke the Insurrection Act to crush demonstrations against him. So no, we're not just freaking out over 3 words. Everything I just listed to you creates a pretty clear picture of someone who has no respect for democracy, intends on wrecking it for his own interests, and is willing to uproot the rule of law to enact retribution against his enemies. And I'm sorry, Mr. Fox News host, I know you really want to talk about the Senate porn stuff, but there actually are more important things in America that we're facing right now and should be discussed. So sure, that is a pretty wild story, I'll admit, and mainstream media did cover it, but that shouldn't replace a conversation about the leading contender for president in one of the 2 major parties in the most powerful country on the planet going full fascist in a presidential campaign. Priorities, Mr. Fox News guy. Sorry, I don't know his name, but whoever that host was, you got to have your priorities straight. And this is the playbook of Fox News: blow things out of proportion, obsess over certain issues while ignoring others, and then distort the facts of other issues to evoke fear among the viewers. And I have a really interesting example of one of the issues Fox News has used pretty consistently to panic their viewers into voting for Republicans. But before getting to that, I do want to show you one other example of a Fox News host, this time Brian Kilmeade, downplaying Trump's Hitler rhetoric. Here he is.
There's other things going on, too, is that President over the weekend gave had a speech, huge rally, unbelievable crowd in New Hampshire. They didn't like his rhetoric. He was talking about the border. He was talking about people coming from other countries, coming from prisons. And they wanted to focus all the Sunday shows, Lawrence, on the word he used, poison. He was just trying to say, we want to keep America, America. We want to build up the border and find out who's coming in and out.
Hey, it's just about securing the border. No, it's not. I've said it before. If Republicans actually cared about solving any of the actual issues with our southern border or with our immigration system more broadly, they would honestly come to the table and discuss solutions. They'd stop dehumanizing, lying about Democrats' stance on the issue. Biden, I'll note, right when he came into office, proposed a comprehensive immigration reform plan. Republicans refused to engage. This isn't about solving the logistical or humanitarian problems at our southern border or elsewhere. It's about dehumanizing people, fear-mongering about people, and trying to scare Americans into voting for Trump. Now, the Fox News method of either obsessing over less important stories to distract from more important ones or distorting the facts of important stories is on full display in another situation, and I want to talk about that here. Super great reporting on this from NBC News that we'll dive into in just a second. But before reading some of that to you, the context is, if you watch Fox News consistently, which, what are you doing if you do that? But if you're forced to, like me, for this position, you'll notice that they're constantly running stories about crimes, trying to say that Joe Biden's causing crime to spike across the country. Now, did we see spikes in crime post-pandemic? Absolutely, which didn't seem to be a Joe Biden issue, but a pandemic conditions issue. But then networks like Fox News ran with that story and never adjusted their coverage now that the facts on the ground are changing. And that's where this NBC News reporting comes in. Stick around for this. Super, super interesting. Crime in the United States has declined significantly, NBC writes, over the last year, according to new FBI data that contradicts a widespread national perception that lawbreaking and violence are on the rise. A Gallup poll released this month found that 77% of Americans believe crime rates are worsening, but they are mistaken. The new FBI data and other statistics show. The FBI data, which compares crime rates in the third quarter of 2023 to the same period last year, found that violent crime dropped 8%, while property crime fell 6.3% to what would be its lowest level since 1961, according to criminologist Jeff Asher, who analyzed the FBI numbers. Murder plummeted in the United States in 2023 at one of the fastest rates of decline ever recorded. Are you hearing that on Fox News? Asher found in every category of major crime except auto theft decline. Yet 92% of Republicans, 78% of independents, and 58% of Democrats believe crime is rising, the Gallup survey shows. And then this is really big. The most recent annual report released in October covered 94% of the country and found that violent crime in 2022 fell back to pre-pandemic levels, with murder dropping 6.1%. And the reason I emphasize that so much is because people will say, sure, crime rates might be dropping, but they were so high before this drop that it really hasn't even gotten back to pre-pandemic levels. Well, yes, it has. Asher maintains a separate database of murder in big cities, which found that murder is down 12.7% this year after rising during the pandemic. Detroit is on pace to have the fewest murders since 1966, Asher found, while Baltimore and St. Louis are on track to post the fewest murders in each city in nearly a decade. A few cities, it does note, including Memphis and Washington, D.C., are still seeing increases in their murder rates, but they are outliers. That is so fascinating and so under-discussed. And I'm calling out Fox News because they're purposefully, severely pushing propaganda in an attempt to hurt Joe Biden and Democrats on this subject. But across the board, media is not covering what I just talked about, except for obviously here, NBC and some others. And as someone who, because of this job, does have to watch way too much Fox News, I can tell you that's definitely not being told on Fox News. The exact opposite story is being told. That just in a couple of years after this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic and brutal economic downturn because of it, under the leadership of Joe Biden, the United States has recovered economically and crime is plummeting. Do you hear that? Really? Again, obviously not on Fox News, but across the media, very rarely. And you can't argue with the facts on those issues. We've gone through the economic facts so many times, and then on crime as well. And as the reporting indicated, it's not just Fox News viewers who have a misperception about crime. A huge portion of the entire country does. Because the horrible stories get reported on, the bad ones don't. Now, does this mean that we don't have too much crime? Obviously not. We preferably have zero crime. And there are so many issues still, obviously relating to crime, that still need to be addressed. It's just to say that the attempt by Fox News and others to say Biden is destroying the country, it's not an honest or accurate attempt. Now, by the way, while we're on this subject, here's a bit of a segment MSNBC's Chris Hayes did on retail theft specifically.
Since President Biden took office nearly 3 years ago, we've been inundated with a seemingly never-ending series of moral panics in the media. And it should come as no surprise that this trend was particularly pronounced in right-wing media, like with the so-called shoplifting epidemic. Obviously, no one denies shoplifting exists. Of course, it happens. But perhaps the reality doesn't merit the breathless coverage it receives on Fox News. In fact, as the New York Times reported last month, quote, the various sources of crime data from government agencies and private groups tell a consistent story. Retail theft has not spiked nationwide in the past several years. If anything, it appears less common in most of the country than it was before the pandemic. Less common. You hear that? Now, among the loudest voices in this propaganda campaign were the retail companies themselves, who took every opportunity to complain about the so-called shoplifting epidemic. If you look a little deeper, though, you'll find multiple occasions retailers have cited shoplifting as a major reason for declining profits, only for the reality to be more complicated. Like, for instance, when Target announced it was closing a flagship location in Manhattan due to shoplifting, only for the building's landlord to reveal the company was actually moving to a smaller location nearby, adding, quote, the retailer didn't raise theft as an issue leading up to the announcement. Sometimes the concession comes from the company itself, like when the CFO of Walgreens told investors earlier this year, and I quote him here, maybe we cried too much about shoplifting in 2022. The silver bullet argument for proponents of the shoplifting epidemic was an analysis from the National Retail Federation released earlier this year, which said that organized theft accounted for nearly half of all retail losses in 2021. So not just petty thieves, but there was this new epidemic of organized crime rings, storming stores and taking everything. That report was widely cited in the media, and fear-mongering about organized retail crime was everywhere. But the facts in that study were way wrong. And it's important to unpack just what happened. As I mentioned earlier, the National Retail Federation released a report saying that organized theft accounted for nearly half of all retail losses. Now, they got that stat from the Senate testimony of an anti-shoplifting expert in 2021.
I want to share firsthand today what I've experienced over 30 years of working on this problem. Organized retail crime represents a massive and growing threat to the tune of $45 billion a year.
Well, he seems credible. He's up there. He's got the microphone. He's a witness. He's sworn in. Except it seems the facts may have been flubbed. As the New York Times now reports, quote, that man was citing a, get this, 2016 survey, which was actually referring to the overall cost of shrink in 2015, not the amount lost to just organized retail crime. That's a huge distinction. The source for the widely shared claim that there was this new trend, this new phenomenon of organized retail theft that accounted for half of all retail losses in 2021, coming out of the pandemic in Joe Biden's chaotic America, was actually a statistic about all retail inventory loss, everything from lost merchandise to damaged product, from 6 years earlier. They had nothing to do with each other. The claim has been totally debunked. In fact, get this, the National Retail Federation was forced to retract it, but not before.
We are learning tonight that organized crime is behind the $70 billion retail theft crisis in this country.
It's a perfect example why you should be skeptical of the way some bad faith actors try to frame news about particularly the economy and crime.
So I'll say it again. It's not to ignore the problems as they exist. It's just to point out that Fox News and others are trying to dishonestly portray those problems for political purposes, and that should be called out. So whether it be a Fox News host trying to say the Senate porn scandal is more important than a potential fascistic president, or their lies about Biden's impact on crime, the takeaway from the segment is we should be really concerned about the effect on the brains of millions of Americans that watching Fox News has. Before we go, don't forget to become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership to get the daily bonus show. You've heard it so many times if you watch all these videos Monday through Friday at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. Plus, follow me on Threads at Luke Beasley Official, Instagram at Luke Beasley Official, X at Luke P. Beasley, and sign up for the Beasley Brief, a daily morning newsletter that summarizes the previous day's events by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/brief, and I'll talk to you all next time.